Happy Thursday. How is everyone doing? I want to welcome Mr. Josh Satin this um, to this live stream. We're going to be chatting about the Canon RC5, right? Because it was announced and everyone was excited. The hype was real. The hype was there, and then there's a lot of head scratching that went around because I don't know if you guys I posted a video with just my thoughts. Now, I just want to be very, very clear that I don't think that it's a bad camera. I don't have my full thoughts on that. It was just, those are just the first impressions that I got with this camera. So, yeah, Josh, how you doing? How is everything?
Great, Raphael. Thanks for having me on today.
Everyone, say hello to Josh. Yeah,
Am I on the screen? I don't see it here, but I'm sure you have control over that.
yeah, you're on this. You want to
Okay.
see broadcast?
No, I don't. No, I'm cool, man.
You're on the screen. You're
I'm not used to being
live.
on this side of the. Yeah, I'm not used to being on this side of the interview, so I get the
Yeah.
dumb end. But thanks for having me, man. I'm pumped about talking about this camera, and I have a lot of thoughts on it too, and been trying to get as much information as possible. I know we've been chatting offline about this camera and cameras in general, so yeah, let's get nerdy about all this.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody in the chat right now, let us know your thoughts, your initial thoughts on the Canon R5C. Because when I first heard it coming out and it's like they're adding a fan, it's like, oh, thank you. It's going to be the camera that we wanted a year and a half ago. And I think you did this in your video where you talked about how it's one of those aspects where it's like, this is it. This is that perfect camera. It has all the things that we love, and now they're adding those things. And then you're like, wait, but they took the things that I love from the other camera. And I think if I didn't buy the FX3 already and I didn't have it in my hand, I don't think I would have clearly seen how much of a missed opportunity it was. Now, overall, a lot of people are saying that they couldn't add IBIS to the camera because it generates too much heat, which I find ironic because they added the fan to get rid of the heat. So let's talk about IBIS first and foremost. Is it important in this type of camera?
So I've been going around in my head about this and chatting with other people too, because I think what you were saying and what I said in my video, if anyone hadn't seen it, is that if they just stuck a fan on the R5 a year and a half ago, we would all be pumped. We'd be like, great, it doesn't overheat. Like, it's a great camera. And I've owned the R5, I've owned the C70, so I have a lot of experience to chat with about this. But it's tricky because I had some people say, hey, like, I'm a 50-50 photo video guy. I'm going to miss the IBIS for photo. And like, I am mostly video. So to me, I started thinking about IBIS for video, but for photo, it makes a big difference. I think for video, initially I was like, yeah, I'd rather have IBIS in this camera, but not having it is not the end of the world for me. Like, there's other things that are more of a bummer for me than losing IBIS in this camera. But I would be looking at this as a cinema camera that just takes amazing photos. Like, I don't really care about the photography side of the camera for my personal use. So the IBIS for me wasn't like, I saw it and I was like, really? Like, the R5 was good. Like, why did you take things out that we loved in it? So I don't know. It depends on what you need it for. But like most cinema I don't know. Is there a cinema camera that has IBIS? I don't think there is. There's electronic stabilization in a lot of cameras, but I don't think there's sensor stabilization. So I don't know. I'm like,
Well, that's the
IBIS
thing.
doesn't really bother me that much, you know?
Well, that's the thing. The whole IBIS scenario is like I have shaky hands, especially when I'm trying to focus on something. And if it's a
Me
telephoto
too.
lens or if it's wide open and low light and you're trying to get the shutter speed a little bit lower and you don't have that ND filter or you're trying to get a specific kind of shot, the IBIS does come in handy. And because it's a hybrid camera, that's where it's actually important for me, where I would feel that like they should have it in there and just maybe even disable it for cinema mode or when they're shooting 8K and it just gets disabled, it locks in and, kind of Bob's your uncle at that point. But it's not it doesn't make sense for them to take it out. Like if it's a heat issue, then make the body a little bit bigger. You don't have to make the same body. You can still call it the R5C. Make the body a little bit bigger. Do the things to keep those things that were already there that made the R5 the thing that people raved about. Don't take those away. It just doesn't make any sense as a hybrid camera. If they wanted a strictly cinema camera, then make the C70 a C90 and make it a full frame camera. Don't put IBIS. Have the same autofocus, and people will be like, "Yes, thank you very much. Here's my money," and they're throwing money at the table at that point. So that's kind of where I stood. Where it's not a cinema camera, but it's not really a photo camera that's up at that level. Like if I was doing mainly photos, I'd get the R5. If I was doing mainly videos, well, I probably wouldn't get the RSC. This camera is designed for me and you. This camera is literally targeted for you and me, the people that want that perfect little hybrid that can do all the things that we want. I got more excited hearing about the FX3 as a Canon user than I did about the RS5
R5C.
R5C. Geez,
I know.
Too many.
Raphael, I think it comes down to the marketing for this camera, and I think that's the problem that Canon's had in the last few years. I mean, there was the marketing that came out for the R5 was like all about 8K, and it was like they came out with this whole thing, and then it was like, but what? This is a photography camera. Like there was no, like that was the whole thing. Like it's one of the best photography cameras that's out there right now, still, and the marketing for this camera is even more confusing. It came out with what's their slogan? Ready for anything. That's like what they had on all their little graphics, and that's their like slogan for this ad campaign or this marketing campaign. But it's branded as a cinema camera. Like it has the C on it, like it's an R5C, and it has all of the EOS cinema menu systems in operation, but it's a hybrid camera. Like it's so confusing.
That's the whole thing. It's like in the video, and that's why I flagged that moment right off the top. It's like, first and foremost, it's a cinema camera. Okay, cool. Then why are you calling it the ultimate hybrid camera?
Exactly.
It's just like, okay, like choose one and go with it, and be like, it also takes really good photos, but it's not the ultimate hybrid camera. Like,
no.
And for who? Like, I'm trying to think about like who actually needs 8K RAW. Like, what is that market? And that market is what, 20 people that really need it. Like I'm talking about like really need it, like for their workflow, because those are the ones that are going to be using the 8K, the red 8K cameras, and they're going to buy 100 of these as their crash cams. Okay, so that's that market. But like, and it's more expensive than the FX3. It's more expensive than the R5, and the R5 already does all these things, but it doesn't have a fan, and it has the IBIS. So it's like, if you don't need to shoot super long videos, and if you're shooting super long videos, why are you getting this camera? It doesn't make any sense. Like,
it's very expensive. I have a lot of negative things to say about this camera, things that I can nitpick and get upset about, but there's a lot of things that have been really cool about this camera. And one thing is the split mode, and I think that is something I wish I saw in the FX3. So if you guys don't know that are watching, in photo it acts like an R5, and in video it acts like a C70. And I actually really, as a videographer, I really prefer that cinema menu system completely. Like it's just a lot of people who just get into it for the first time, they get confused because they're used to a photography camera. But if you're shooting video, like it is awesome. And same thing in the Sony system as well. Like their cinema line menu is great as well if you're just shooting video. And I wish this was in the FX3. Like when I pick up my FX3, I wish it acted more like a video camera. And I think that's something that's super cool about this camera. I know there's issues that people are having, like when you switch back and forth, it's like an 8 or 10 second delay, which is crazy. And there's some things about that, but the fact that it like really does act like a cinema camera is kind of cool, Raphael.
Yeah,
like, I think that's a neat feature.
I think overall it's a fantastic camera package. Oh,
you got some questions in here?
Yeah. Hold on. Okay, so Roger,
sorry, we're just going off.
Yeah, Roger thinks that the 8K is overhyped, and to put too much in a hybrid camera not that many people shoot 4K or sorry 8K. Most people don't even have 4K monitors. And that's my point. Like, who is this?
I know.
Who is it targeted to film in 8K? Like, okay, fine, you can film 8K MP4s, but it's like, why? What's the point? Like, for stock footage people, cool, okay. Like who is this marketed for? Again, it just feels like a weird hybrid, like all the things. All the things I love about the R5 are the resolution, the photo capabilities, the fact that it can do all these things, and then we just wanted like, okay, make sure that it does over here. Like that was the whole point of my video. Where it's just like, just add the thing that we're all barking about. Like add that back in, and it didn't need to be 8K. So I'm curious to see if they do a R6C with a smaller sensor. Will, where it's 4K kind of maxed out.
That would be an awesome camera.
Sure, but what will they take away that will just
I know. I don't understand the 8K thing either, and it seems like that's a big part of their marketing. It's 8K 60 raw, like internal, blah blah blah, no overheating, no limits. Like the 8K 60 raw, it's like 2.6 gigabytes a second. Like think about that for a second. Like no one, you know what I mean? I don't get it. There's a lot of things like C-Log 2 is a big one for me, Raphael, that they didn't include that in this camera.
Well, that's an easy fix. That's a firmware. That's easy.
But I don't know if it's a hardware limitation. That's what I've been hearing too, is something about the sensor that it can't do it. I don't know. But, like as a videographer who uses this kind of stuff, I'm like, can I just get 10-bit 4K C-Log 2, please? Like, they're like, no, here's 8K 60 raw. I'm like, I don't need any of that. Like, give me the stuff that we like need to work with on a regular basis. So anyways, that was one of the big things for me.
Yep. Hold on. There's a comment. So it's not a hybrid camera. When it's raining, you can't use it because of the fan. The camera will get damaged. Maybe, but with the FX3, because it has the fan, it completely reminded me of the FX3, the way it's designed. Hold on, let me see if I can. Oh no, I can't see here. But
yeah, I can't hold mine up. I'm using mine right now.
Yeah, with the fan here, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to do it. Give me, like with the fan on the side of the camera, like unless you're holding it weird. Where am I? Can I? There we are. So I don't know if you can see, but the fan's there with the FX3, and unless you're holding the camera weird or it's pouring, this is going to be like my janky setup with my filter. I ordered a step-up ring and it hasn't come in yet, but that's a whole nother aspect. Let me get back to where we. All right. So yeah, like with the fan, I don't think it's gonna be a big issue. Like it's not water sealed, but if it's built the same way as the FX3, the fan is separate from the rest of the body. So even if water does get into that portion of it, it should be okay. Oh, here's Scott is saying right now that the electronic stabilization doesn't work with RAW. And
oh god.
No, but like at that, like with that, I wouldn't even care, because I probably wouldn't be using the digital image stabilization, because it has its own problems and becomes weird and wonky. Like if I was to use it as a cinema camera and I'm doing that kind of high profile work, would I want to use the smallest camera possible? No, probably not. Would I want to do it? I don't want to be a one-man band trying to delegate all that footage, all that storage. Like you're talking about being on a crew at that point, handing off your SD cards to get dumped while you keep shooting, because there's no way you can do it. And some people said, well, just get the Ninja 5 Plus and record 8K RAW right into the into the recorder, which is fine because that's how the FX3 works. So if you're already kind of going down that route, you could have had IBIS. Like the Sony FX3 has IBIS. I'm not sure. Can you turn it off? Josh,
What's
I'm
that?
looking at
The
you.
FX3?
Yeah, can
Yeah,
you
you can
turn
turn
off?
off the IBIS.
Yeah, so like why not just
Absolutely.
keep it there?
There's three settings. There's off, there's standard, and then the active mode.
Like why not keep it in the R5C and just like if it's overheating, boom, it shuts off automatically. Or just gives you a warning saying, "Oh, we can't use it." Like why remove that whole feature, which is what everybody was loving over the last 2 years, like image stabilization, yeah, and it's like now it's gone. It's like, oh, no big deal. Like the thing that I didn't understand with all the people that were making the videos is like all the like, yeah, yeah, but it's like, yeah, and they're just making it felt like they're trying to
They're making
justify
excuses.
it was
Yeah,
okay. I'm
absolutely.
like, no, it's not
Yeah.
okay. Again, like as a Canon shooter, like I have multiple Canon bodies. I have plenty of lenses. This camera was designed for me to be like, please take my money here. Like, this is exactly what I want. And I'm just like, no, I'll stick with two separate cameras. And it's like, if I want to take photos, I'll take photos. If I want to take video, it's like, yeah, it's not ideal, but like with image stabilization, I want that with those long lenses. Like that's what I want to have. Like if I'm taking those kind of photos. Like I know I'm kind of whining at this point where it's just like it's a camera. Who cares? But it's like, like I was a Canon fanboy for so long. I'm like, dude, you need to get on this Canon, stuff. It's like good stuff. And I'm like, and it's been 2 years in a row where I'm like, come on, guys, like just give us like they didn't have to do anything except for add a fan. That's it. Call it
I
the
agree. I agree.
R5F. Yeah. And sell one
Yeah,
with the fan and then without a fan. That's it.
yeah. I mean, I just don't understand who this camera's for. I think that's really at the price point and with its features, like this isn't really someone's like main video camera. Like if you're really high-end video, I don't think this is the camera for you. And if you're really into photo, like you're gonna have an R5 or whatever. Like
Yeah, you
it's
already
just a
have a camera.
weird.
You're not going to upgrade to this one and lose those things that you love about the R5, right?
It's just a weird release. It's just confusing to me. I don't understand it.
Well, it's like they try to satiate all the people that were saying it overheats, get rid of the overheating. So they're like, whatever it takes, get rid of the overheating. And they're like, well, we're going to need to remove IBIS. They're like, fine, do it. And it's like, well, we're going to also have to use the a different autofocus. And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. It's like whatever to get rid of the heat. But I will laugh. I will
So
laugh if anyone comes and they're like, my R5 overheated or i5C overheated. Those are gonna be interesting videos if that.
I think it's also like in Sony releases, like no one's touched this camera. Like a handful of people have touched this camera, like when they released it. And like Sony, when they do the release, they send out like a whole bunch for everyone to test and make videos about. So there's going to be a lot of question marks when the camera actually gets out in the wild. And I think that's going to be, I don't know, I think that's going to be really interesting for sure. But I want to talk about the IBIS. I don't want to go on too long about it, but like with the C70, for example, if you use the electronic stabilization combined with an RF lens that has stabilization in it, it's pretty good. Like, I'm not saying you're gonna like walk around with it, but like if you have to like grab a quick B-roll or maybe a static shot, like it's
Yeah.
pretty good. I don't know. I think that technology is going to get better over time. So I don't know. The IBIS, I think it's going to bother a lot of people, but to me, like that wasn't the thing that really bothered me the most. So
Now, I just want to be very clear that I'm not raging about this. Like ultimately, it's a piece of gear. It's just I was holding off to buy the R5, and I needed a camera that wouldn't overheat. And I wanted just one camera that just lives in my bag and it comes with me everywhere, like travels. But, obviously, a lot of people weren't buying too many crazy things or traveling over the last 2 years. So when I kind of passed up on the opportunity to buy the R5, I had my order in. I was talking with Canon. I was going to buy a few of them. But it's just like, I'm just going to wait. I'm just going to wait and see what comes next because there's a 2-year cycle, 18 months or whatever. So honestly, it doesn't bother me. I'm not going to be spending my money. People that are going to buy this camera are going to love it. They're going to find ways to work around it, just like with every other camera that everyone has. there is no perfect camera. You buy the
Right.
camera and it works great for you. And there's going to be scenarios where it's like, oh, it would be nice if it had, meh, everything else doesn't matter. So it's not really that I'm raging about this, but it's more that I think the people went off is when Canon announced the EOS R, the first RF camera. They were just kind of like, yeah, this is where we're going. Check it out. It's gonna be okay. Like they were like nonchalant about it. Like it wasn't like this huge push. They're like, this is where we're going. Let us know what you think. There was no number attached to it. It wasn't a cinema camera. It wasn't replacing any camera. It was just like, this is what we're thinking. Do you guys like it? They had one card slot. They just made it as minimal as possible and tried to price it really nice. And people were like, oh, this is terrible. No one wants to have this camera. And then like after a year, everyone's like, this camera is actually really good. Like it's really good.
Yeah.
Like all the
R
stuff
was
that.
great.
So I'm hoping that that hype train that Canon tried to do is just misguided. And when the camera comes out and gets into people's hands and they're like, it's a fantastic camera. Great. It took me a year to buy the FX3, a year of sitting and holding, kind of like not doing anything. But I wanted a camera that could give me something that all my other cameras couldn't do. So that's why I went with the FX3 versus any other camera that was out there. Because every other camera was just a rehash of what my cameras could already do.
Yeah, I think the R5 when it came out was all the hype and all the 8K and all the stuff we already talked about. And then I was hoping that sort of pattern that happened with the R was going to happen with the R5, that like after people started using it for a while, they realized the limitations and workarounds. And like I own the R5, like great photos, like for video, it drove me crazy. Like the 4K HQ hands down is the best image out there, like in terms of detail and sharpness and clarity, but it overheats. Like, and I'm always outside. Like I was like, all right, I'll just try it out for a while, do some vlogs. And I was just like, looks great, but I'm always like, is the thing gonna overheat? It would shut off mid-take and I wouldn't even know. And then dynamic range is always like, the biggest thing for me on a video camera. So that's where I look at this and I'm like, well, they made the autofocus worse in video. You still don't get the full dynamic range that you could get out of a Canon camera, and it's more money. And I'm like, like that's where, but I'm speaking from like what I need it for. You know what I mean? Anyways.
Yeah, no. But the whole thing is there's so many comments in my latest video, people saying how, the autofocus on the C70 was fantastic. And I'm like,
no.
It can be in most scenarios. I haven't used it, but I know you have, and there's something that just frustrates you every time. Because
that's literally why I sold that camera, was the autofocus. I think that the image out of the C70 will beat anything under $6,000, hands down. It is absolutely beautiful. The dual gain output sensor, however many stops of dynamic range they say it has, the cleanest shadows, like the most natural looking. I love the image, but I would be standing there interviewing someone outside. Everyone's well lit, and it would just jump to the background. I had face whatever on, and
yep.
I'm just like, I can't, as a run and gun documentary shooter, when I'm doing the interview, the camera work, the audio, putting the video together, and like I'm just making sure the thing's staying focused on the person. Like,
yeah. As a run and gun,
deal with that.
As a run and gun shooter, that's what you need to do. You need to be able to. You need to be able to have those kind of performance things where you just trust the camera. And you were saying so many times that you just didn't trust the camera.
Especially on darker skin tones, it really struggled.
Again, and if you're not paying attention, if you're not literally looking at the monitor and you lose the shot's gone, especially if you're doing interview style stuff.
Yeah.
So Jonathan just was saying here, the IBIS was the reason he went with the FX3 over the FX6. I did.
Oh man, that's
exact same.
tough.
I did the exact same reason.
I struggled with that too.
My whole workflow up until the FX3, I had no IBIS cameras. Like I had the IBIS lenses for the RF lenses, but like my cinema cameras, the C200s, those never had IBIS. And anytime I wanted to do, but like even a small move, there was always like, it's too heavy. Like those cameras were too heavy to be able to do even the smallest little moves. So then I would have to do all this post stabilization, just like then like you always get that weird whoop, weird wobbles and stuff like that. So I did the exact same thing. I went with the FX3 because it had all the features and the quality that my other cameras weren't able to do at the time. So you know, you can't buy every single camera and be like, oh, I'm just going to use this one for that day, and like it doesn't make sense. Like it's always good to have a small package essentially of gear that is with you. And if you're working on bigger stuff, you can rent whatever. Like you don't need to have every camera, but because for today I'm gonna use that camera, and then tomorrow, like that doesn't make sense for me. Like you can't run a business that way. And you don't become a rental house. Like unless every single camera's coming out, or every interview, every camera's coming out. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. I don't know if you want to get into the FX3 versus FX6. We're kind of sticking on the Canon subject today. So
that's today's about the Canon R5 and the R5C, and how the R5C compares to the FX3, because those are the two competitor ones. I was actually surprised how beefy the R5C looked, like comparatively. Like how can Sony make such a tiny camera and the R5C just felt big and chunky? Like it felt just like a smaller version of the C70. So I don't know if Sony just has some magic sauce that they're able to do that.
Well, it's the reality of these hybrid cameras and this oversampling that's going on now, because for people to have a hybrid camera, even though for what I need, like 12 megapixels in the FX3 or A7S3, more than fine for what I do. Like you shooting a thumbnail or something for a website, like social media, it's fine. But if you start getting into even the A7 IV with 33 megapixels or 45 megapixels on the R5, for you to not have like a line skipped or pixel binned image in 4K, like that's where the overheating comes in. And that's really the friction that we're having right now with these camera designs, is to have the high megapixels, then you have the heat problems to get a nice 4K image. So that's why Sony is like,
megapixels are only important for photos. Like unless you need 8K, which again, it just boggles my mind. Who is actually using this except for those high tier people that have the high-end computers, that have the massive storage, that have the clients that are willing to pay big money to use those cameras? Cool. It's for them. But for $5,000 as your main camera, I don't know. Like that's like some people only buy one camera, and it's just like, is it enough for everyone to do what they want to do? And especially if you factor in, it's like, do you really need 45 megapixels? Like, are you printing photos that are going to be billboard size? Like, what is your end purpose? If your purpose is to post it on Instagram, what's happening? Who sold you on you need this thing, right?
I mean, people like it for cropping. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people use it in photography. But I think the trend we're going to see, Raphael, like in the next few years, is that more and more cameras are going to be oversampling. Like I think the one-to-one readout, that kind of camera that we see on like most cinema cameras and like the FX3, A7S3, FX6, I don't think they're going to have too much more of that in the future. This is just my gut opinion, because if you look at like the Komodo is oversampled, the FX9 is oversampled. It creates a more detailed image. And I think once the tech is there where we can manage the heat, I think more cameras are going to be there anyways, even if it's not for the photo specs. So the reason why Sony can get away with it now with such small bodies, because there's no oversampling going on. It's just a lot less processing.
So my gut feeling, and this is just working in the post-production realm, the way upscaling works in post, like taking a 2K image and making it 4K, or a 4K image making it 8K, the technology is getting so good that a camera company will jam it into a camera body, put in a 4K sensor, and be able to spit out an 8K image that looks amazing. And it should reduce the heat, it should reduce the processing, or even in the computer, like Apple will be able to do that. It'll just become standard as part of any NLE, where you just upscale to 8K and it's going to look amazing, and it'll retain all the dynamic range, and it'll just take the source image and make it work. So I think we are getting into an inflection point where it's just like iPhones are starting to get to a point where the photos and videos are getting really good on these, Like I still wouldn't use it on a pro shoot. It doesn't make any sense because optically it's just not there yet. And the processing isn't able to get cinematic mode to actually look that cinematic. Like for everyday cute stuff and getting B-roll, okay, good, like no problem. It works great, but like I would not put this in front of a client. They'd be like, yeah, can you fix all that haloing and that's happening? They're just not there yet. I just want to point out, Tyler has a like we chatted about this earlier. He actually said, I think having the C70 menu options and interface on a mirrorless camera is a bigger win than most people are recognizing. And I completely agree. I know, Josh, you agree, because those menus just make more sense from a filmic standpoint. And when you're already used to it, it just makes the whole process so much smoother instead of trying to understand what you're looking at. It's like, are those the right settings? But again, even that is something that I think Sony is going to add in. It can be as simple as a firmware update if they wanted to do that, or FX3 Mark II, or whatever they want to do moving forward. But it's still exciting times.
Yeah, agreed. I think that was probably one of the first things I said in this live stream was about the menu system, because like I would love to see the FX6 menu in the FX3. Like, give me monitoring tools. Like, we can't ignore that. Like, that is unbelievable that there's waveform, false color, all that stuff is built into the R5C. Like, I want that in the FX3. I want the FX6 system in the FX3, like for video.
Look at us wanting all this stuff. Just give it to us already, damn it.
FX3 Mark II, I don't know, whatever. Yeah. There are other things that feature-wise that like stood out to you, either in the camera or what they removed?
Well, I did find that having to switch between photo mode and video mode, like it's completely different. One of the things I really love about the EOS R is you can be in photo mode taking pictures. And this is where the hybrid part really, really I loved about it, where it's just like you can set it up where you press the record button, it'll have your settings, whatever settings you had in the video mode, and it'll start recording within like 1 or 2 seconds. Like for me, I was like, this is awesome, because I would be on a shoot just taking photos. Oh, this is a great moment, because I'm literally already looking through it, and just without even taking my face off of the viewfinder or from the back, and just hit record, and I capture that moment, and I let I let my finger go, or I tap it again, boom, we're back in photo mode without missing a beat, without having to do the chimping that people do. It's like, hold on a sec, can you wait, just wait. So like for photographers that are doing weddings or live event stuff, that would be that killer feature that is just like, if you can switch between one and another, those are the kinds of things as a hybrid shooter go completely under the radar, but are so appreciated, because it's like, if you can capture a moment and take a banger photo to go with it, like people are like, they're paying you more money to come out for more things because you're able to do those kind of things, and you can't recreate those moments. So I get, but that's maybe a whole different market. I don't know. So
and I don't think we should feel bad about complaining about this stuff or asking for things. These are expensive cameras. They're very professional tools, and we have certain needs, and we're looking for the closest camera to our needs. So I don't know. I think it's fine to talk about this stuff. This is like our tools that we use for work,
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's like I complain about After Effects and Final Cut Pro and Premiere and all the post-production tools that I use every day. So it's just another tool that it's like, oh, I wish I could do this because I work this way. And everybody works in their own way. Everybody likes a particular style. And once you get a fast workflow, you want to stick with that. You don't want to be slowed down by the gear. Like I always want my computers and my gear to work as fast as I can think, not me waiting for it. I just want to. So apparently, a Canon representative said today in a Q&A that they could consider adding one video mode to the still side of the R5C.
Oh, I did watch that. That was with Pro AV and Media from Canon. I watched that this morning. Carl brought it up, and he was like, "Can we just add so you can, like what you said, if we're in photo, can we just have a video button?" He's like, "I don't even care what mode it is, just like basic 4K, like anything." She's just like, I'll pass that along. Like that was kind of her reaction.
Oh,
Um,
so that's I don't know what you're really asking, but you know, thanks for the suggestion.
no,
Okay,
she knew exactly, but she's like, no, it's separate. So
like let me be again very clear. I'm gonna reset my thoughts again. I'm not complaining about the camera. I think it's going to be a
no.
fantastic camera, and everyone that's going to use it is going to make amazing content with it. And that's really what it comes down to. So, what I'm just confused where it's like, it had these things that were great, and you took it away. Why? Why call it the R5 then? Like those are the things that added to the R5 being the R5, the 5-axis or eight axis image stabilization, the new innovation of autofocus, dual pixel autofocus 2. But I'm not going to give you that in this new one, in this brand new camera. Those are
I
the
think
things
it
I'm
has to
like,
do with yeah, I think it has to do with Canon's line in particular because when the R5 came out, it does everything. It's the ultimate camera. It's like just give me the really good photo camera, give me the really good video camera. Like I like how Sony kind of does it, right? You have the R line, the S line, and then the A7 line that kind of is in between. It's like if you're 50-50, get the A7 IV. If you're more video, get the FX3 or A7S3. Like
well,
when you try to cram everything in there, like there's all these compromises going on, and you can't make
and
everybody happy.
I think someone made a comment where Sony just seems to have figured that out, or they're running with that mentality where it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, we have the A7S3 where it's like, this is more for photographers who want the video quality. Let's change the body a little bit to make it more cinema friendly, where people can mount stuff to it and try to keep it as small as possible. So the more and more I looked into the FX3, the more I was like, damn, like I want something as small as possible because like I'm getting older, my back is starting to hurt. Like I holding a big rig or like a shoulder rig, like I don't want to, like I just want to be able to, have it where the micro jitters are not present, but I can still get a really good solid a video clip. It just has to be 10 seconds, and 10 seconds of a stabilized clip without the stupid micro jitters, without me having to rig out something that has the weight. Like those are the things where, especially for B-roll, when you're trying to come in for like little close-ups and stuff like that, you don't want to have the, like, oh, it's too heavy because like, I've been doing this for 4 hours and everything's just shaking at that point. So that's why that's why the IBIS was so confusing to me, where it's just like, this is supposed to be that hybrid thing, that thing for, compact, small, but then like, we took the IBIS out, so jam it on a gimbal. And it's just like, well, you're defeating the whole purpose of making this small and compact. Now I have to have a second piece of gear. Why not just bring a second camera that has that built into it, where I can do those 2 shots? And anyways,
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting when you compare the FX3 with the R5C, and I think that's kind of something we need to talk about a little bit more, I think. But the fact that, like, if you look at just how much they cost, right? So if you factor in the Tascam audio unit that you can get for the hot shoe on the R5C, now we're talking $5,000, 5,000 US versus 3,900 from the FX3 to get XLR inputs in this small camera. To me, like, you
with
don't always
IBIS
need
and really
XLR.
good autofocus.
I know, but
it's not a
for me
45
and you-
megapixel camera, megapixels.
megapixels. Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I the draw for the photo side on the R5 just doesn't do anything for me. So, and the FX3 came out a while ago. This isn't like a new camera.
Yeah, it came around when the A7S3 was announced, right? And
it was like 3 months after that. So
yeah, something like that. Where it's
year
like,
old.
And I think that's what Canon looked at. They're like, okay, so the A7S3, people went nuts because like, oh, like the whole community is like, look how great it can do in low light and all these things and 4K this and 4K 120 and it doesn't overheat, so forth and so on. And like they were already comparing it to the R5 at that point, where it's just like, yeah, but it's a much smaller sensor. I have not heard people complaining. It's like, oh, I wish the A7 III had a bigger sensor. If it only had a bigger sensor, like how many of those videos have you seen? How many articles or people talking about how if only the A7S III or the FX3 had a bigger sensor? Because most of the people that are buying these cameras are buying it for the low light capabilities. So again, Lothar, Lothar, apologies if I'm saying your name wrong, but like he said, if you want a good hybrid camera, the R5 or the R3 are probably a better choice, because you're able to do the hybrid stuff. If you're filming so much, then getting a hybrid camera probably isn't the best thing to do. Now, to be honest, I bought the FX3. I think I've had it for over a month. I think I've taken one photo with it. Like I've switched it to photo mode by accident, and I was like, "Hey, it has a photo mode." Like it didn't even register to me to even bother to use it, because for me, my photo camera is still the EOS R. It's a great camera. It's a 30 megapixel sensor, great photos. I can use all the lenses that I already have, like the RF lenses. So there's no need for me to get a larger sensor for a little bit better photos that I probably wouldn't even notice. And I'm not even a photo first shooter. I'm a video first shooter. So every camera, the video side is always the important thing. Okay, so let's compare it to the R5C to the FX3. Is it a one-for-one comparison? Like, first and foremost, the price. So just to have the two items the same, so we have the, hold on, let me bring something up. So yeah, so first and foremost, it's $1,000 different. If you
factor
want,
in the audio.
yeah, if you factor in the third-party audio attachment, which is in the hot shoe, which makes that a janky setup, like that's going to break, because so many people that I know that had the
FX3 handle.
A7S3,
Yeah, the FX3 handle is not great. Like I wish it was built better. Like it's not super strong. It's made out of plastic, but it does like have two things that screw in. I've seen online a lot of people complaining that theirs broke, but it does screw in, and I like that a lot better than like the XLR K3M or M unit where it just goes in and then you just tighten it down on the hot shoe. Like it's got two bolts that go down into the camera. Like to me, that's much more secure.
Yeah, and
so
it feels like a solid camera.
Mhm.
Like I'm not opposed. Like there's nothing about this camera that I'm like, oh, this is only better. Like I like everything about it. Like I actually got the small rig half cage that I can add some other stuff to it, and it still feels like a small camera. Like everything about it feels small. Like the top handle is nice when I want to do XLR, but I wouldn't take that with me. I would probably, I'm going to buy the hot shoe adapter with the mic built in. So if I wanted to do any kind of filming outdoors, I'm not going to bring an XLR camera adapter for that kind of stuff. So, but the fact that it's already included for about $4,000, it's like, so what is $1,000 more? What value do you get for $1,000 more? 45 megapixels?
I think you get 8K for those people that need that. Like again, there are some people that need that and most people don't. You get the photography side of it, right? You're going to get the 45 megapixel. You're going to get the R5 in there, like as a photography camera, which is a great photography camera.
Well,
but
the R5 without the 8-axis image stabilization, which was, one of the first things that they're touting as their new innovation. So you're gaining, you're paying for, it's almost like you're paying $500 for a fan. Like that's what it seems like. And
the other thing that people aren't, I don't know if anyone's been talking about that much, but the batteries are going to disappear so fast in this camera. Like the LP6, that's an old school battery design. Like that thing's going to last like, I don't even know, 40, 50 minutes at most, like running that camera hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. Like it's a lot of money without IBIS and some other things. But again, the FX3 can do 4K 120, right? The other thing is that the 4K 120 is pixel binned on the R5C. So it only oversamples up to 4K 60. So that image, what I noticed when I owned the R5 is that the pixel binned or line skipped, whatever that non-HQ mode is, looked worse than the FX3. It was not as crispy as the FX3. So
I have to say, if I didn't have the FX3 as a Canon shooter, I'd be like, yeah, but the Canon one's going to be better. the image coming out of this little tiny camera is fantastic. The 10-bit the 10-bit codec that they have in there, it's not pleasant to work with on older machines, which I still have. So I do the first time in my life I've had to make proxies to edit because it's my system is struggling, and I have a pretty beefy system, and I knew that was coming. So with an R5, those are the same problems that are going to be coming out. And I actually talked about this a year ago where I said, if you're planning to get any of these new cameras, also budget in a higher powered computer to work with all the footage you're going to be getting. And people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. And then like 3 months later, all these videos, it's like, my computer, I can't edit this footage. And it's just like, yeah, it's like, you know, you can see the problem coming up and it's okay. And like I'm used to working with red footage and airy footage and all these high end codecs. But for a camera that was going to be my personal with me all the time, I'm future planning, not future proofing, but I'm future planning to get a computer that can work with the cameras that are going to be coming out over the next couple of years. And someone said it's like they added the 8K because they're future proofing your footage. It's like who films are still being delivered on in 2K for the most part, unless you're doing $100 million budget movie where they're doing 4K HDR. Like those workflows get so ridiculously expensive, and I don't know. I think because I come from the pro side, and I'm doing the personal, the prosumer side as well, which this YouTube channel really had me focus in on, because I'm used to working on multi-teamed, month, big budget projects where those computer systems are there, and then when I'm like, I want to have that kind of quality, but I'm going to do it by myself, and it's just like, wow, everything takes so much longer if you don't have the right gear, and you're waiting for stuff to process, and it's just the whole workflow is just slow and painful. So I'm dipping my
Scott's
toes
got a good
into
question there. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat here too, Raphael.
How does the FX
how does
compare
that-
to the Canon 4K HQ? You would be the best to answer this.
Yeah, so I was hinting at that before. So the 4K HQ on the R5, because I have on the R5 and I own the FX3. The 4K HQ is crisper than the FX3 footage. It looks absolutely incredible. But big caveat here, there's less dynamic range on the R5 than there is on the FX3 because you don't have C-Log 2. So when you shoot an S-Log 3, which is equivalent in my brain to C-Log 2, you get a lot more dynamic range on the FX3. And to me, that makes all the difference, because when I'm shooting outside, and I am a lot for my farming channel and for the stuff I do, I'm losing like probably 2 stops with the R5, because so I have to make a decision. Do I crush the blacks or do I blow out the sky? Like on an S-Log 3, you kind of get everything. You kind of get the full image. I mean, you can't be like ridiculous about it, but in terms of image quality and like clarity, the HQ mode is unbelievable, hands down. It's unbelievable. But dynamic range to me is more important.
I actually agree. The sharpness, because we chatted about this with the FX3. I have my sharpness set way down. That's why my image looks a little bit softer right now. And I add the sharpness in post. I'm just used to doing that, especially in a raw workflow. Because when I work on bigger projects, like again, multi-team, multi-person projects, we tend to shoot raw because there is no going back to try to fix something later, because it costs way too much. But for my personal projects, I can count on my hand how many times I've actually shot raw with my cinema cameras. One time for my own personal projects or even the smaller stuff. Like, there's no reason to shoot raw unless you're doing something that has a $50,000 or higher budget. It just doesn't make any sense, because you're going to need the extra time to be able to process that, to do all the things. And even with the red footage, 99% of the time we shoot the red footage, We converted to a 10-bit ProRes 422 HQ, and we finished the project that way. One of my best friends, he shoots red all the time. He does 2 or 3 movies a year. He'll shoot red, and he'll convert it to ProRes. And rarely does he do it to ProRes 444, 444, whatever, 4x4. So it's just like shooting raw is a marketing term that people just bought into. Like, you have to do it. Like when you're taking photos, shoot raw. Don't even bother with JPEGs because JPEGs are garbage.
Correct.
But when shooting raw versus the 10-bit codec that are built into these cameras, these 10-bit codecs are fantastic. RAW has never, or JPEG has never been that good. There isn't a comparison between a raw photo and a JPEG. Like there is no comparison. So that's why I don't understand why everyone's so gung-ho for shooting raw and why that's necessary. Again, like there's a market of maybe 2,000 people in the entire world that need that consistently. So why is everyone else buying it? Why are you using it? And like,
I don't use raw. I don't know anyone that does. I don't know anyone that shoots in raw video.
Like, I know a lot of YouTubers that were like, I shot raw and this is the little test thing that I did. It's like, yeah, but are you ever going to use it for a client project? And they're like, no. No, it's just, it was too, like, I just wanted to show, it's like, if you're doing that, then that doesn't make any sense. If anyone that's in the chat right now, let me know, have you ever shot raw? And do you plan on shooting raw consistently? And is that one of your main things? And if it's raw and 8K, like I think people forget.
Or even 4K raw.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think people forget that the digital cinema revolution is only 15 years old. Like, it's still in the infancy. Like, a lot of the tech hasn't caught up to make it an everyday worthwhile endeavor.
There's a lot of misconceptions out there about raw too, because Red owns raw essentially, and so you know what I mean. Like, you can't go in there and change if you're not shooting on a Red. Like, you can't go in there and change the ISO or change the white balance like you can in those cameras. So it's not a full raw. It's like a modified raw. Like, it's not even raw. Like, that's the thing.
Yeah, and that's why I lean more towards Red cameras when I want to do bigger projects, and I'll rent them because every year their sensors improve. There's no way I would want to spend $100K on a Red package where I can rent one for $3,500 for a day, like everything, and bill that back to a client and get all the benefits of the latest technology. But yeah, being able to change the white balance, do all that kind of stuff, like that's the raw readout. Have you ever used the raw? I think there was a question up here. Like the FX versus raw dynamic. Scott, can you just kind of clarify what you're saying there?
Like the raw and the R5? I don't.
No, the raw and the FX3, I think. Oh yeah, even the.
I don't. Oh, that I never deal with recording externally, so you can't. Can you record raw? I think you have to record raw externally on the FX3.
Externally, yes, and that it's 16-bit, so it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Again, like, I don't want to deal with bringing a monitor and a recorder with me. Like, the reason why I'm shooting on the FX3 is because it's tiny and it's like all in there, and I like to record internally. I can do dual recording, which I often do. And frankly, for 99% of the projects that you're going to do, 10-bit 422 is good. Like, out of any of these cameras.
That's what Lothar is saying. Like, a raw, forget it. Like, ProRes 422 is awesome. And yeah, like, I love ProRes. I love it, and I've been pushing it ever since they kind of announced it back 2008, 9, or whenever. It's such a easy format to work with. Yeah, the files get huge, but so are raw files, so it really doesn't matter. And so let me ask you the question of, if you had to take a caveat to a camera, would you give up IBIS on a hybrid camera, or would you give up megapixels on a hybrid camera that's tiny? Like, what is more important for you as I'm okay with not having that, but I prefer this. Like for me, it's IBIS. I on a hybrid camera, I'd rather have IBIS for the type of stuff that I shoot, especially video and like handheld for B-roll stuff, where it's important, where you need to get the camera into those places really quickly, where you may not have 2 hours to set up, but like you're in a run and gun scenario where it's just like, okay, the shot needs to be good, otherwise you're stabilizing it in post. And digital stabilization is never as good as the optical stabilization. Just as the cinematic mode, it will never is not as good as an actual optical bokeh that you're able to get from actual big lenses.
So in that hypothetical, if I take megapixels or IBIS, I'd take IBIS because I'm fine with the lower megapixel for video. But at the same
So
time, I think it also depends.
are we truly
I think it depends
hybrid
on the
shooters?
lenses you have too. I
Yeah,
think it
that's
depends on the
true.
lenses you have too, because for Sony, like I use 2.8 zooms for like everything. That's just my workflow, and none of those are stabilized, and so I need IBIS. But in Canon, the lens stabilization in their 2.8 zooms are unbelievable. So that compared with electronic works really well. Like I on the C70, like it works really well. So to me, that's why IBIS is so much more important with Sony. But that's like a whole nother thing. But my question is, if they took out IBIS, like why did they put NDs in there? Because that's the whole thing. Like if you can't have both supposedly, and you're gonna
No,
label this.
we can't complain about more stuff.
Sorry. I just don't understand the not ND filter. That one would have
If the
sold that camera.
FX3 had internal ND filters, it's just
Oh
people would
man.
be like, what craziness is like? I'm pretty sure Sony, if they could, they would jam it in there and
Or if
they would have it.
the R5C had it, like they took out IBIS, like if they put NDs in that, they'd sell. I couldn't even tell you how many they would have sold. Like
Oh,
twice as many.
absolutely. One of my favorite things about the EOS R is when I first got it is I had the all EF lenses, because I think they only announced one or two RF lenses, and they were all
Right.
both $2,800. Like they were crazy expensive. So I was like, okay, yeah, no thanks, not yet. For a new system that has not been proven. So when I first bought the R, I bought the adapter with the drop-in filter. And people are like, it's crap, it's garbage. And it's like, I fell in love with it because I loved having a ND filter behind every single lens that I have. Oh no, what happened?
Oh, there's would I trade IBIS for VND in the FX3? Yeah, I
Yep.
think so. Well, that's kind of the discussion of the FX3 versus the FX6, frankly. And that's the debate I've had was FX3 or FX6, because you're trading IBIS for the VND, essentially, with those two cameras. So it's a really tough one. I know someone brought that up earlier in the discussion, so.
You just double check to make sure that the stream is still going, because it looks like, or maybe just my browser crashed. Anyways.
Are we good?
I don't know, guys. Are we still live? Let us know. But yeah,
It's all
all
good.
good here.
All right.
Good. So again, like when I was working on another video yesterday, when I watched your video and just had that, just kind of reading about it and the announcement and everything that was coming down the pipe. I wasn't going to make the video that I made, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't stop thinking about, why did they do that? Like I remember I was editing and just literally out loud, I was like, but why? Why?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any. And so I was like, so I stopped recording and just literally, or sorry, I stopped editing and I just hit record and just put that video out, because it was just it boggled my mind. So I needed to get those thoughts out there, because I'm pretty sure everyone else is going to have those same kind of questions.
The other big question mark I had was the micro HDMI. Can we just get that out of the way? Because that is like the weirdest thing for me. Out of like, I think almost everything that happened with this camera, micro HDMI for a cinema camera. I mean, it's branded as a cinema camera. Like that, you can't rely on that. It's like,
but it has time code.
The worst.
Time code. Which is great, is needed if you're going to do a multi-camera shoot. But if you're on a shoot that needs time code where you're jam syncing with audio, I don't think you're going to be using that camera. And like, you're not going to be using that camera for the audio sync to it. It just, maybe like I know you can, but like, is that the camera that you're going to be doing? I don't know. Did it need to have 8K RAW? Could they have just gotten rid of RAW and done leave the IBIS in, do external RAW recording, just like the FX3, kind of take right from Sony's playbook, do 8K RAW, like full sensor readout, but only 4K everything internal? I think that would have been a better play. No overheating. People would have been like, the 8K RAW is cool, but most people are not going to need it. Like if they left in the stuff that was already good, slapped on that fan, did 8K external recording to reduce the heat, I think I would have been like, yeah, that camera.
I just don't understand why they can't just turn off IBIS. Like you can do it in other cameras, like the FX3, you can turn it off. I don't get. You know what I mean?
Again, that's I was
maybe it was to keep costs down. I mean, they're saying it's for heat, but there's probably other reasons. Like it's probably just otherwise the camera would have been, I don't know, $5,000.
So they want to keep the cost down. So what about it brought the cost up if they took that out? Like the fan can't be $500. The time code can't be $500. Like what did they add to it that raised the price higher than the R5 right now? Like
I think
like what is it compared
to
to the
functionality? Because they add in that other operating system, which again is to me is software. Like they just have to program that in. That's not like a hardware thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Now is the boot up time the lag there because it literally needs to boot up another operating system?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's from what I've seen, it's like 8 to 10 seconds switching back and forth.
I remember when people complained that the Red camera, a $100,000 camera, was taking 10 seconds to boot up, because people were missing shots.
This is a hybrid camera. You should be able to switch back and forth between modes.
No. It is first and foremost a cinema camera that can take nice photos. Cool.
Yeah,
I get it.
Yeah, the comments about the IBIS. I heard them saying they're like, oh no, electron. And someone in the comments here, like, they were saying like, oh no, electronic is so much better now, and there's so many situations where it's actually better. It's like you can put both in the camera. Like the R5's got both electronic and right, doesn't it?
But that's exactly why I made that video, because I was like, why take it out? Just leave it there or disable it. But it's present in the photo mode. Like say, sorry guys, it's locked off for video, but in maybe in a firmware update in the future we'll unlock it. But right now it's only like that's the part where it's just like and they touted how they made their own. It's a new version of it where it's like they were so happy about it.
Their IBIS is great too. The R5 IBIS is awesome. I know there's complaints about like on wide angle lenses with the wobbles and stuff in the corners, but for everything else, it's a great IBIS system. I don't know, man.
Well, again, like micro jitters, and I'm pretty sure they could have fine-tuned it through software. Like there is ways to not have it wobbly, and the reason it wobbled is because there was two systems that were trying to fight with each other to make it work. That's really what it came down to, why that wobble came in, because it's like the lens was trying to image stabilize, and then the sensor, and it did this whole like it's trying to get it in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know where the $600 price increase from the R5 to the R5C. I don't get with taking out IBIS. Like I don't get where that money is in that camera.
Because they can. Inflation. I don't know. Like that's.
I mean, I feel like Canon cameras in general are more expensive than they ought to be in a lot of situations. And I know there's a lot that goes into that, but when you compare them with other cameras, and people are paying a premium for Canon, like, that's just how it's been. Like I think they're priced that way.
Well, hear me out. Sony is a much bigger company than Canon is. Sony is huge comparatively. So they make their own sensors, and they've been making sensors for so many other people. So they put a lot of R&D. Every iPhone
I've heard this argument.
Yeah, every iPhone has Sony sensors in it. So they're able to, try different things and sell it to a whole group of people. So they're able to, just through economies of scale, they're able to make these for much, much less. Where Canon, they have a much smaller niche where they only make cameras, printers, and I think some scanners. Like I know that they do medical imaging, but so does Sony. They do all those things as well. Plus all the other things that they do. I'm surprised that Sony doesn't make a car with how much stuff they build. But yeah, like apparently Sony, like they won a deal to do most of the cameras for a lot of the automakers for their self-driving cars. Like their ability to make these for much cheaper just because they're able to make so many. I think that's why the prices come down. And it's the same thing that Apple is doing, where they're just building their own chips now and they're putting it into their own stuff. It just saves, and they kind of pass it on to all the all the consumers. So Sony's R&D is much, much bigger. They're able to push the limits quicker, I think. And that's why when they come out with cameras, they're like, you know what, let's just make a camera for these guys and we'll throw in a little bit of, you know, some nice sauce over here for some photos. Yeah, I can take photos, but it's mainly for this. They want, the photo guys want a really good photo camera. Okay, we'll just give them just the basics, like the A7 IV. It can do 4K, but like it has its limitations. But no one's complaining like, why isn't it doing everything? Because they're not selling it as everything. It's like, if you want that, go with that. If you want this, go with that.
Right. I like that approach.
If you want really good stuff, here, take a look at our Cine line, right? Like,
do you want to talk about the C70 at all, Raphael? Like how that fits in here too? Because I think that's a bigger question as well for people that are between those two cameras. I know you haven't. Have you used the camera? I know you haven't owned one, but
no. But like I said earlier in the stream, it's like for me personally, if they had just made a C90 that was full frame, no IBIS, internal recording at 4K RAW, sure. Two dual card slots, XLR, full size XLR, that would be more interesting to me. And it's like, you know, maybe add a stupid photo button where it's just like, if you want to take a photo, it's like, you know, push the button and it'll grab a still off the sensor. Like something like that would have made more sense for me as a video first kind of shooter. But a hybrid, like the C70 doesn't play in this field. Like the C70, that you put that beside the FX6. The FX6 doesn't take any photos. The C70 doesn't take any photos. So it's not a hybrid camera. It's a cine camera. That's what it does, and it does it well. So no, the C70, I don't think it even with the R5C, it doesn't make any sense. It's like someone that's buying the R5C, would they even have a C70? Or would this be the B camera to the C70 or this like I don't know. Like how would it fit in? Like when you use the R5 with the C70, were you taking a lot of photos with it? Were you relying
No, I don't take a lot. I don't really take a lot of photos. So but the R5 was my B camera to my C70 because and I was also using the R5 for filming myself, like vlogging and stuff. So yeah, I think it's tricky. I think the R5C will fit in as a B camera to the C70 or the C300 Mark III or the C500 Mark II. For someone that wants a small B camera that they can take photos with, I think it fits into that. And I think it's so tricky, back to what we talked about before. It's like, it's called a hybrid camera, but it's also a cinema camera. So I think some people are going to look at this like, can I buy this instead of the C70 because it's full frame and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know. The big thing for me is the autofocus in video. And we did talk about this a little bit, but that's a huge question mark that I still have about the R5C.
Yeah. And Scott here says he doesn't understand how when Canon or others say that that pro cinema people don't need IBIS. It like, you know what? I need it. I want it. I want to be able to use it because when I do solo stuff, I don't want those micro jitters. If I did, and I want to do handheld, and I want to get, you know, all Jason Bourne kind of footage, cool. Let me turn it off. But like for the most part, I'm holding a lot, And then it's like there's a point where my hands are just like, especially if you're like, oh, you want to film an interview, it's like, oh, I didn't bring a tripod, and you start doing this thing because it's like, God, this guy won't stop talking. It's great, I love it, but it's like, all you start thinking about is like how much you're shaking and how much you're gonna have to stabilize the footage of a handheld shot. So then you're like, trying to bring it closer, and you do this weird, right? It's like not needing IBIS or someone telling you don't need it. It's just like, don't tell me what I don't need. I want it. It's just like, you don't need a self-driving car. It's like, I know I don't need it, but I want it. That's the way I want to go. I want all my cameras to have IBIS going down the road into the future, right? Just like I want all my computers moving into the future to be fanless, and I don't want to hear the fan. But you need a fan to be. I like
but
that.
I think the same argument goes for autofocus, because for the longest time it's like, well, cinema cameras, you don't need autofocus in a cinema camera because cinematographers don't use autofocus. You know what I mean? It's the same sort of argument. Like, why not? Like, it's a great tool. Like, if we can have it, like I want it in there, you don't have to use it. You can put it in manual if you want.
Just wait until the day where these cinema cameras have AI powered autofocus or focus racking or focus tracking that is so good. We're going to get back to the same argument where it's just like, no, but film is pure. You don't understand the art form. It's like, listen, I don't give a shit about the art form. I'm trying to make a story here, and it's a business, and the better I can do it, and if I can nail the focus every single time, and we're just waiting on the actor to hit their mark. I've been on sets where we're spending $30,000 an hour, and the actor is hitting their mark every single time, but the focus guy's like, no, sorry, you missed the focus, and it's just like, if a producer came in and be like, okay, you can have this guy who has 30 years experience, or you have this AI software that it's already been proven, it's been in the field for 5 years, and it's going to nail it every single time. The producer would be like, sorry, Joe, and just like that's what's going to happen. Like, that's the same reason why everything's shot on digital cameras now, not on film, except for the purists, which is fine. It's a preference. It's not better. My whole argument is, if the Beatles were recording today, like coming up the ranks and recording today, they would record on the best technology that's available to them today, because that's what they did 60 years ago, or whenever they recorded their first albums. They recorded on the best technology that was available to them. Would they do it their own way? Yeah, absolutely. But they wouldn't be like, no, it has to be analog. Like, no, that argument doesn't make any sense. Like, give me all the stuff and let me choose what I want to use, if I use it or not.
Agreed. We got any more questions in there, Raphael?
Probably, but I rant. Like a steamroller sometimes. I feel I just get excited.
Yeah, me too.
So I've seen others say that the R5C is a good B cam with the C70 so far, the image matching. Yeah, well, I hope so. Like, and that's one of the things that I kind of talk about a lot. It's like, don't buy a camera, buy a brand. Like, if you need multiple cameras and they're all going to be shooting at the same time, it's ideal to have the same sensor. Even the same cameras won't have the same sensor. Like, there's going to be little differences, but it makes the whole workflow a lot easier. You can always match different cameras, but you make your whole, you streamline your whole process. So yeah, all my Canon cameras have always matched, and they look fantastic. And it took me a while to get the FX3 to a point where I liked it, and I haven't started blending the two images together because I just want to spend the time doing that right now. So
it takes a while anytime you switch cameras or switch brands to get used to the footage and being able to manipulate it the way that you want. It always takes a while. And just how to capture the image, because every camera, you got to expose it just a little bit differently and sort of learn the different codecs and stuff. So yeah, it always takes a while.
So with autofocus, how much better, from your opinion, from your perspective, was the R5 to the C70? Because those are the two competing focus technologies. And I know that you
Okay.
said that the C70 had, like, it drove you nuts a little bit, but you, like, would you say you're confident with the R5 focusing compared to the C70?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's about autofocusing on people. That's where that's the most important thing for me, because otherwise, like if I'm doing B-roll, I'm usually using manual focus for B-roll. I don't use the like tracking very much. Like but for people, I want eye detect or face detect. Like I want it to lock on. And what I noticed was when I bought my C70, I was like, I'm just going to use this for everything. I'm going to film myself like outside, no problem. And it would just lose focus constantly on me. Like I tried all the different face priority, face only, like all that stuff, well lit, wasn't like underexposed or anything. And then I was like, all right, well, I'll use the R5. R5 is completely amazing in terms of autofocus, in terms of being really sticky on the subject. And so when I saw that the R5C has the autofocus from the C70, I'm like, that's one of the main reasons I sold my C70. It just wasn't reliable for autofocus for me. Now, if you're in a controlled lighting situation, like an interview with all
Mm-hmm.
fixed lighting and everything, I think it'll be fine. But for me, I don't film as much in those situations, and the R5 would do it, and the C70 wouldn't in those situations for me.
And that's
So that
where
was
hybrid shooters would not, majority of hybrid shooters aren't in, like, oh, okay, studio, locked off, go.
right, right.
Like hybrid shooters are like, they're the explorers. They're the ones that are out there. And that's just from, like, I want to have one camera when I go out there. Because if I'm here and it's like, I want to take a photo, well, I'm just going to reach over there and grab my photo camera. But when it's in my bag and I'm traveling, that's where it's like, I just want to, like, if I'm doing an interview and I'm not standing behind the camera looking at it because I'm usually talking to the person. I want to know that it's rock solid, the autofocus, and the image is going to be in focus. But
I
like,
think there's still, we don't know yet. That's the other thing, is like this camera's not out there.
true,
So I did
true.
hear when they were talking about this today in that video that it is a different sensor than the C70 and a different processor. So there's a chance that it could be better than the C70 just because of this different hardware that's processing the image, and maybe it's slightly updated. So I think until, like, we're all going to jump on this and be like, oh, the autofocus sucks, but like until it gets out there and people actually use it, I think we're not going to know exactly what it's like and what the performance is like.
Well, I'm curious, and I know that I'm going to want to get my hands on it, and I'm going to want to play with it. That's for sure. And again, this wasn't more about venting. This was more about, like, just curious to their decisions. Where when the FX3 came out, or the A7S3, people were like, "Yeah, that makes sense. That's great. Oh, it has that. It has that. It doesn't do 8K. Okay, I don't care." Like, the biggest hiccup for the A7S3 and the FX3 was like, well, it's only 12 megapixels. But, like, again, nobody's been complaining about that moving forward, especially the video guys. They're just like, this image is great. I love it. Though,
There's one feature though that I do like with higher megapixels, and that's crop mode. And I think that doesn't get talked about enough, is having the ability to crop in on the sensor.
mhm.
And now owning the A7 IV and having that feature, and I've been shooting with that camera more, I love crop mode. I can push a button and 50% punch in like immediately with
on
no
the
loss in quality on the A7
on
IV.
A7 IV.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it's still a 4.6K oversample too. So it's not line skipped or pixel bin. The image looks amazing. Um, and I think that ability to punch in is really handy in a lot of situations. So that's one benefit I would say about having higher megapixels. And I forgot to think about that before when you asked me. So just want to toss that back in that.
Well, I remember that was one of the things that I liked about the Canon R. It's Canon R, where when you go to 4K, it went into just that middle sensor as a crop sensor, but I was able to get a 4K image, and it
Hmm.
zoomed in and did all these things. Like, you're forced to do it. You didn't have the option. But again, the whole thing came down to why I chose the FX3, and I'm actually, after hearing the announcement for the R5C, which was kind of like, should I just wait a little bit longer? Is that I needed a camera that could do all the things that my current camera setups could not. So I needed something that would complement it, not just replace something that I already had. Again, I don't shoot enough RAW, but if I did, I have two cameras that can now do it. I wanted something that can do 120 frames with autofocus. I wanted something in 4K. I also wanted that 240 frames in HD because I can always scale that up. No other camera that I had before was able to do that. The only other cameras that ever did that were the iPhone or Red cameras, which was opposite ends of the entire scale. So again, getting a camera that complements what you already have to your toolbox makes way more sense. So, and I wanted to, all my other cameras didn't have IBIS. And when I was shooting, even with the C200 and getting those micro jitters, there's so many shots that I took, like B-roll or whatnot, over the entire lifetime I've used the C200, that I just didn't use those shots because they're not good enough and they look as terrible as they sound they would look, right? Even after trying to stabilize them, you still have those little, it's like, and then you see the digital wobbling, and it just doesn't make sense. So optical image stabilization made way more sense. So that's why I was like, no, that was the one thing, that was one of the reasons I bought this camera. And they're like, okay, fine.
Just taking it out. It's gone.
Yeah, it's all gone. All gone. I'll come back though.
I have to say the FX3 is pretty complete for like a video shooter. Like there's not very few things I'm like, I wish it had this. Like I think the only complaint I have is it doesn't have ND filters. That's really the only complaint I can really think about with that camera for the way I use it.
Like would I've liked a 24 megapixel sensor? Yeah, maybe for the photos. Maybe. But again, it hasn't been an issue.
I have to say, Raphael, the A7 IV is really impressive, especially for the price. Like the image is really, really good. And in my tests, the low light noise is better than the FX3. I did a video about that. So
yes, but
I don't think enough people are talking about the A7 IV though.
Like for the low light, the FX3 and A7S III, like when you're talking like 12,000 ISO, that's fine. It's okay, but it's when you start getting into the crazy numbers.
But I don't. Who shoots in that range? Like no, most people don't. You do? Okay.
But yeah, like those, I've had scenarios where I'm in places where like there's literally no light, or I have one, like a pocket light with me, but I need to get a shot because I'm not going to be there again. And being able to do that, like that makes so much, like I'd rather be able to get a shot that is usable than walking away being like, well, my camera just couldn't get it. Like, no, it's like,
I just wish, because in my use case, like I don't wind up in those situations. And if you do, then that's the camera for you. Like 12,800, 16,000, FX3, hands down, going to be better.
Like even 100,000 ISO. Like that's what I'm talking about. Like crazy.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, it's crazy. And that's a very niche feature of that camera. I think it's interesting. We didn't talk about this, but the R5C now has dual base ISO. And I don't know why this was never talked about with the R5, considering it's the same sensor. So they're saying 800 and 3200 are the two base ISOs in C-Log 3. So I don't know what's going on there. I'm really curious about that. And the A7 IV has a second ISO at, is it 3200, I think? So for me, like I'm often more in that range than the 12,800, in that like 3,000 if I need to raise the ISO. So to me, like having that base ISO in there, I think is really helpful. And I think that's one thing that people complained about the R5 was low light because there was no second base ISO. So I'm curious what's going on there. If it's just noise reduction or there's another sensor circuit, I don't really know what's going on. There hasn't been too much talked about.
I think it's noise reduction, built-in software noise reduction. That's they're just able to do. Like it is processing the image at certain points. Like it processes the image and then it hits another ISO, and then it pops into that secondary. It flicks it on essentially, right?
That's why I feel like
noise reduction. Yeah, no noise reduction, and then it turns it on, and it you're playing at that point. But yeah, I just wanted to really kind of do a compliment to the video, the videos that both you and I made with our thoughts about the R5C, and just kind of hash out our real thoughts. And we're not hating on the camera at all. I actually think it's going to be a fantastic camera, and it's filling that need that they missed out a year and a half ago that people complained about. But I feel that they're waffling. They're just holding their they're holding on to something, and I don't know why. I don't know what's coming down the pipe, what their roadmap looks like, but they do seem like they're just this was a stopgap. Like this camera didn't need to exist in its current format. They could have had a whole new one that could have done a little bit more for a little bit more, and then did the R5 Mark II a year from now, where the heat is reduced. It just add on everything they've already built into. Because right now they feel like they've taken a step back. Like, is it a separate camera? I don't know. Like it feels like it's supposed to be filling that need. So
well, there was rumors about some new cinema cameras that were supposed to come out like a month or two ago. What was like the next C300 and C500 were going to be like 8K oversampled. Did you see those rumors?
No, I kind of stopped paying attention because I get too excited and I want to spend money, but I don't want to do.
Because to me that makes sense. Because like I was saying before, I think we're going to see more of these oversampled cameras with higher megapixels for video.
And I'm excited for where everything's going. I do
so maybe
look forward to.
So like what you were saying, like maybe the R5C is that B camera for those new cinema cameras that are going to come out, because then you have more of a matchy situation, because it's not, it's more of that oversampled look.
Yeah.
I don't know anything that, like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just guessing.
I feel once they flesh out their entire RF lineup, then they'll be able to start refining it. But I think they're still in the middle of their transition into the RF realm. It doesn't make sense for them to be able or to make any more EF mounts. They've kind of saturated the market in there. Those cameras are fantastic. There's not much improvement they can do, and everyone's just gonna be like, yeah, but all these RF lenses. And that's, as a company, that's what they're trying to sell. That's where they're going. They may do the C700 update for people that are in that realm that need that camera. But I know a lot of people that were hardcore Canon users that switched over to Sony. Like, I'm talking cinema cameras are now shooting on FX9s, FX55s. They went that route because they just liked how the consistency of everything that they were doing. And the E mount is already an RF lens, like the short
mirrorless. Yeah,
it's already mirrorless. Exactly. So Canon is still playing catch up, and I think they're going to spend that the next decade really trying to figure out where they fit in. Like they just stopped making DSLRs, or Sony dropped that years ago. Now they're just like, then that's not for us. So
I'm curious about the reaction, not the reaction, but like what's coming down the pike from Sony and Nikon and Panasonic and Blackmagic. I'm really curious, because I think there's so much competition right now in that like $3,000 to $6,000 prosumer or pro level, like entry level, pro level video cameras. So like I'm really curious to see like what the next Sony camera looks like, for example. I don't think they have to do anything anytime soon. I think their cameras are holding up really well, but that's what I'm really curious about. Because like when you bring a camera like the R5C to market, like everyone's like, okay, everyone's like level goes up. You know what I mean? I think we all win from that, but I'm just curious to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It took Sony almost 6 years or almost 7 years to do an A7S III.
Yeah,
from the A7S II.
I don't think we're going to see an A7S IV. I think that line's done. That's my personal opinion. That's not a discussion, though.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. I think FX3 Mark II is where we're going to be going down the path. I think that's where the FX, like that's where that camera is going to live. Like more people are using. That's why they built the FX3, because more people were like, it's so close to being that ideal cinema camera, like that pocket cinema camera, which Blackmagic kind of coined the term on. Like if you think about it, go back to the original pocket cinema camera that Blackmagic released. That's the first thing that I pictured when I saw the FX3. I was like, it's the pocket camera, but it's not micro thirds, it's full frame. Like that's like Sony went like, that's a good idea. We're gonna steal that one. and like that's what it felt like they did. So, but yeah, let's wrap it up here.
Cool.
Josh, thanks so much for hanging out. You guys, everyone in the chat, thanks for hanging out and watching. Definitely share your thoughts. Go watch that video that I made about my thoughts on the R5C, and go watch Josh's video, because we do lay out our thoughts really concisely.
You were much more concise than I was. I went on for like 15 minutes.
Okay, well, but you went through point by point. I had 2 points: no IBIS, no autofocus, and who is this really for? That's really what I want to talk about, because those are the things that confuse me. Everything else, it seems like a great, fantastic camera that I'll probably use, but I'm not going to be buying it. It doesn't make sense for me. So anyone that is in the chat, let me know if you're going to be buying it. And make sure you go and check out Josh's channel, Content on Content, where he talks about Canon cameras and the Sony cameras. He's making this transition into the Sony realm. So he has lots of fantastic info and deep dives into his thoughts as a solo creator using these cameras, and what the struggles and the great things are about those cameras. So go check out his channel. If you're watching this later on, I'm going to leave a link in the description. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Josh, thank you so much for hanging out today and chatting about the the Canon R5C. You guys are awesome. I'll see you guys soon. Bye for now, guys.